Hi YouTube, Darth here. Like it or hate it, attrition is a big new gameplay concept for the Battlefield series. In Battlefield 5, you don't automatically start with a huge amount of ammunition, and as a soldier you don't automatically regenerate health past 30%. This has led a lot of people to claim that the game is either tedious to play or too slow, because a lot of people are used to never running out of ammunition and never needing to worry about a medic. And they're not wrong, this has been the way of things in the franchise for a very long time. In fact, most people who play Battlefield today probably haven't played Battlefield past the previous 2 or 3 iterations. What attrition represents is a very different kind of gameplay than they're used to. You're forced to play carefully and closely with a squad, teammates, and know where your supplies are. For folks who aren't inclined to do this, it can feel like a sudden and irritating burn. While I like the concept, I know it's not perfect, there's definitely mandatory downtime while you find supplies. This can feel really unsatisfying, particularly in vehicles. Another sticking point for me is that the controls to activate medkits on PC are pretty awkward. Pressing and holding the 5 key is not convenient. Holding down the heal key in combat is a very hard maneuver for a single hand that is also trying to maintain the ASDW keys. So the mechanics of the system are a little rough right now, but they could be improved. And they very well might be based on player feedback in the open beta. But as I said, I kind of like the general gameplay direction here. It forces players to switch their playstyle from being unceasing run and gun to considering their options. Basically the opposite of Battlefield 1. A single lone wolf cannot kill 20 players back to back. Streaks of 4 to 5 are far more likely, with a modest pause in between to restock. A particularly skilled player can make that ammo and health stretch way further. If this is starting to sound like a skill gap, it is. And it's one of the things I think the Battlefield series has been missing lately. Even if the implementation feels a little rough right now. Getting back to the state of the franchise, there are a lot of people out there who are not used to this mechanic and who aren't happy about it at all. They like what they're used to, and that's perfectly normal for human psychology. And there are things about this system that could use improvement. For the sake of those folks, I think one of the better ideas I've heard is that attrition could be split into its own category of gameplay. Kind of like how previous Battlefield titles have had a hardcore mode. Rather than simply shunting it off into hardcore and having the majority of the player base outside of elitists forget it exists, I have a slightly better idea. Flip the naming scheme on its head. Don't create a hardcore mode at all. Instead, normal Battlefield 5 includes attrition. Then create a second game mode titled Casual. What would a casual mode look like in Battlefield 5? Well, first your health would automatically regenerate to 100%. Slowly though, no need to worry about picking up and carrying health packs with you, no need to visit supply stations before going anywhere. Medic health packs would simply work like they did in previous Battlefield titles. A medic could toss a pack to a player to start their regen immediately, and it would be faster than the baseline regen. So basically exactly like Battlefield 3, 4, and what people are used to. Medical supplies or medic dropped crates could simply do the same thing, except it's on the player to actually interact with those supplies. As for ammunition in casual mode, players would simply start with twice as much as they do now, or an additional magazine, whatever feels balanced and appropriate for the mode. This does reduce the support class's ammunition necessity to previous Battlefield titles. But in Battlefield 5, they've also gained the engineers various abilities, so I don't think it's a terribly bad hit to that class. For vehicles, simply have the vehicles regenerate ammunition up to their maximum. Again, quite slowly. Assuming HP regen comes along for the ride, this means that they pretty much never need to visit a supply station unless they've been in heated action for quite some time. It also makes aircraft quite a bit more viable. Though if Battlefield 1 has taught us anything, we may not need to have automatic vehicle HP regen at all. So what does all of this accomplish? Well, 2 things. First, it gives a place for all the folks that simply cannot stand attrition somewhere to go. You can get your run and gun fix without having to worry about game mechanics. Much like looking for raid accomplishes the need it right now fix in World of Warcraft. Players can just play without worrying about the metagame wrappers. Second, the casual label clearly pushes the player base into the intended gameplay of Battlefield 5. Which is something I think hardcore failed to do in previous Battlefield titles. Partly because I believe that the underlying game mechanics of hardcore were flawed in the sense that they produced inconsistent gameplay, but more importantly because it wasn't considered the default mode players could by and large simply ignore hardcore. Hardcore wasn't something that you graduated to, it was something that you simply played because you believed it was either harder or you considered yourself an elite player. If it was your preferred game mode, great, you enjoyed it. Maybe that's how folks at large feel about attrition right now. But I think what DICE is trying to do with attrition is more commendable than a hit point shift or disabling a few UI elements. They're trying to add a natural pacing to combat, uptime, and downtime. To do so, they've introduced a mechanic that harkens back to the very early Battlefield days. One that separates players who can conserve health and ammunition for fights rather than withering it away. One that rewards squads who play closely together, players who plan fights in advance or know their way around the map and are more resourceful. Again, I don't think it's perfect, but the direction feels good. There's a natural intensity that climbs in fights as I run out of one resource or the other. Yes, this does slow down the game if I choose to wait it out, but it increases the risk-reward factor. And maybe more sadistically, I enjoy that it ruthlessly punishes careless players. Are you the kind of player who departs from one battle at half health and runs directly into the next? Well, you're going to lose basically every time. And I love punishing them. That's a simple skill gap that does not involve twitch mechanics, but merely preparation and forethought. Logistics of play is not a new concept, not even to this franchise. It was basically a key characteristic of Battlefield 1942. You could run out of ammo or health and you had to rely on teammates or nearby resources to restock. This is before console shooters came in and basically repaved the expectations that health was a regenerating resource and ammunition was relatively infinite and not a resource to be sought. Now, one of the biggest movements in shooters in the last decade, the Battle Royale, has resource accumulation as one of its biggest and most important gameplay elements. Why wouldn't a modern Battlefield shift in this direction, especially if it's going to be a core game mode with Firestorm? If it's expected to compete with those titles, they have to build towards it. And Battlefield is not the only modern shooter going in this direction. Overwatch, Rainbow Six Siege, and others all punish players for not preparing or working with the team correctly. There is regimented uptime and downtime between fights, and a single player cannot expect to carry the entire team. Is not improved team play something we've been asking for in Battlefield for the last several titles? Your mileage may vary depending on your teammates' IQs, but again I said the direction was commendable. The end result does have some rough edges. So this is very obviously a different kind of Battlefield game than we're used to, which is why I think it makes sense to cater to the last decade of taste with a different gameplay mode. That's where casual mode comes in. But I think it's also important to evolve the game so that it does not get stale, something that I think DICE has done directionally very well with attrition. Implementation, I think, will get smoother and better as time goes on. In the follow-ups to the beta, I would be surprised if there aren't some changes to the current implementation. Community suggestions of increasing the regen limit from 30 to 50 and including a health pack at the spawn don't seem completely unlikely. Some of the start of life tedium is likely to be removed or reduced. For instance, every round starting with me walking to the nearest health or supply station doesn't seem like a long-term winner. There's probably better ways to set people on their path and then require them to restock, rather than having resource accumulation for the first minute of every life. Additionally, the control schemes for activating health packs could be better. As I said, it's pretty awkward on PC right now, though consoles may be slightly better with access to the D-pad. It still means taking your thumb off an analog stick, unless you have some kind of freaky hand I'm not blessed with. Maybe 2 game modes are the way to go. Evolve the base game with attrition, but give folks what they want in an alternate. No reason not to make both crowds happy. Yes, you do split the community, but you had a clear call to action to graduate from one of them. Just give the previous generation a little nudge by calling their game mode casual. Yes, that's harsh, but it is tough love in this case. The game's gotta evolve. But what do you think about attrition and the gameplay changes to regen in Battlefield 5? Have you played the beta and are you a fan of the changes, or do you find them lacking? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, be sure to force choke that like button. If you didn't like the video, give the thumbs down a force push. I'm planning on continuing to do Battlefield content in the future, so be sure to stick around with a subscribe. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube.